President Trump signed an executive order on police reform. That's interesting. A little surprised that he did that. Let's hear what he says is in it.
What's needed now is not more stoking of fear and division. We need to bring law enforcement and communities closer together, not to drive them apart. Under the executive order I'm signing today, we will prioritize federal grants from the Department of Justice to police departments that seek independent credentialing, certifying that they meet high standards, and in fact, in certain cases, the highest standard. That's where they do the best, on the use of force and de-escalation training. For example, many believe that proper training might have prevented the tragic deaths of Antoine Rose and Botham Jean. As part of this new credentialing process, chokeholds will be banned, except if an officer's life is at risk. And I will say we've dealt with all of the various departments, and everybody said, it's time. We have to do it. Additionally, we're looking at new advanced and powerful, less lethal weapons to help prevent deadly interactions. New devices are being developed all the time, and we're looking at the best of them. And cost is no object, no object. Under this executive order, departments will also need a share of information about credible abuses so that officers with significant issues do not simply move from one police department to the next. That's a problem. And the heads of our police department said, whatever you can do about that, please let us know. We're letting you know. We're doing a lot about it. In addition, my order will direct federal funding to support officers in dealing with homeless individuals and those who have mental illness and substance abuse problems. We will provide more resources for co-responders, such as social workers who can help officers manage these complex encounters. And this is what they've studied and worked on all their lives. They understand how to do it. We're going to get the best of them put in our police departments and working with our police. We will have reform without undermining our many great and extremely talented law enforcement officers. President Obama and Vice President Biden never even tried to fix this during their 8-year period. The reason they didn't try is because they had no idea how to do it. And it is a complex situation. Beyond the steps we are taking today, I am committed to working with Congress on additional measures. Congress has started already, and they'll be having bills coming out of the Senate and possibly out of the House. And hopefully they'll all get together and they'll come up with a solution that goes even beyond what we're signing today. But this is a big, big step, a step that hasn't been taken before.
All right, so just to outline for everybody, he wants federal grants to departments who prioritize credentialing. I mean, that's like more funding for the police, it seems to me, so kind of the exact opposite of what protesters are calling for. He wants to ban chokeholds, but he says except if the officer's life is at risk. Less lethal weapons, which is, again, just more of a giveaway to police officers. The less lethal weapons. It's hard to say that. They've been doing a lot of damage recently. Somebody lost an eye in one of these protests because they shot it at their eye. So I don't know how good of an idea that is. He says he wants to basically stop bad cops from being shuffled around from one department to another after they lose their job. That idea is good in theory. I don't know if in practice his executive order will actually do anything about that. And then he says he wants more resources for social workers and social workers to work with cops and, you know, them to be more involved in responding to like the homelessness crisis, for example, and kind of take that out of the hands of the police. Again, in theory, that's a good idea. I just don't know if in practice what he's doing is actually going to make that come to fruition. I guess we'll have to see, but I really don't know. I don't know if this has teeth. It seems like it's almost like a branding exercise to be like, see, we're doing something. And listen, you do have to say you do have to say, the whole defund the police movement, it is working. It is working. You have a lot of police departments around the country and a lot of mayors who are taking direct action. They're cutting police budgets. They're disbanding the police department in Minneapolis, which is, of course, where the George Floyd killing happened, and they're going to replace them with like a community first responder type thing, which effectively will do policing, but it's not the exact same police department. And there are all these reforms that I do think a lot of them are substantive, and they're popping up in a lot of places. So, in other words, when you go out there and make a demand that sounds as extreme as defund the police, which sounds like abolish the police, it's worked in the sense that it's a position that's been staked out by activists that sounds extreme, and then all the politicians are rushing to split the difference between defund the police and do nothing. And when you actually split the difference, you get a lot of, I think, relatively substantive reforms. Now, again, in the case of Trump, I don't know how much teeth this has, so it could just be grandstanding to try to make it look like he's doing something when he's really doing nothing. But some of the ideas are silly because they're just giving more resources to the police when that's exactly the opposite of what people are calling for. And some of them might not, in practice, measure up to do anything. But the activists are forcing real change, so don't let anybody tell you that this isn't having an impact. It's absolutely having an impact. Now, I will say, the bottom line to me is this. If you're not ending the war on drugs and demilitarizing the police, then ultimately this is all going to come to naught. Like there are some changes, like cuts to departments, which I think are real, which will have an impact. But outside of that, all the other things are, to steal a phrase, it's like rearranging the deck chairs on the deck of the Titanic. I said deck twice. Rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. Really, you have to end the drug war and you have to demilitarize. I get it. We're a nation that's armed to the teeth, so the cops can keep a gun in their car, but they should not have guns on them when there's like they show up to an incident where there's no reason to have fear. Other developed countries, they're not armed at all. Now, I get it. They also don't have as many guns, so that's why I said there's little asterisks if you could keep it in the car. But you got to demilitarize and you got to end the drug war, because the drug war is the fuel that allows the over-policing and the oppression of poor communities and communities of color. So you're really not changing enough unless and until you do that. And that's, to me, the bare minimum of what needs to happen. Obviously, there are other things like independent prosecutors across the board, and there's a bunch of stuff. Bernie actually has a bill that has a lot of very smart ideas on this, but Trump is at least moving when it comes to the messaging of it. So he at least feels the need to grandstand on doing something, which is good. I don't know how substantive it is from him, but the defund the police movement has started to get real concessions around the country. So at least in terms of being a strategy to get reforms, I think it's working. I think if you talk to people who really are hardcore believers in defund the police, they'll say we're not winning because we want to actually defund the police. But I think the fact that they're calling for that is dragging the Overton window to the left and ultimately will have some positive effects. But again, I think we need to bare minimum end the drug war and demilitarize the cops. And until we do that, there's not going to be enough change, and you're not going to really put a significant dent in the 1,000 deaths we have every year because of police violence.